Good morning, everyone. For those of you different times of the day, good day to all of you. Thank you so much, Anthony and Sibel, for inviting me and some of my EAPRO colleagues to speak today. Anthony and I met last year on the Belfast conference of EAPRO, and I had the pleasure to do one of the Cloud 8 poster presentations. At that time, I was really still in the super beginning phase of my PhD. And I'm now, almost 9 months further, I think, or at least in my head, it's been 9 months, but I guess it's a little bit shorter actually. But I'm not finishing yet. So I think, Anthony, you very kindly said that I will present my dissertation, but I'm not in the dissertation phase yet. I'm still a second-year student, so I'm in the middle of this research. So what I will share with you today, if that's all right, is basically what I've been doing so far, a little bit about why I'm doing what I'm doing and why I think it's really important to be looking at this topic from a humanistic side. And let me try to see if I can actually share my screen with you, because that would be quite helpful, I guess. Let me see. I think I have to find the right presentation first, I guess. I cannot find it right now. Give me one second.
That's okay. So yes,
always makes me so nervous.
That was my. You find the presentation and share it. That's fine. Yes, I should apologize. My bad pronunciation. Presentation, not dissertation. That's to come, isn't it?
Oh, that's absolutely fine.
Again, as we mentioned, Danaë has put her website in the chat, so you can find more about what her work is, and also the very interesting university that she is at. But I can see now.
Wonderful. Do you see a naked guy drawn by?
Yeah, we have got our Leonardo there. So
wonderful. Wonderful.
We can see that absolutely perfectly.
Fantastic. That's good news. I saw I had a work presentation open. I don't think I want to bother you too much with that today. So let's not do that. So thank you again. My presentation is on my research on promoting human dignity in culturally diverse teams. I've been an independent professional for about 18 years. I'm an organizational psychologist by education. I've always been working with intercultural teams in the profit and non-profit sector.
I do research at...
can I maybe please ask you, if you have not muted yourself, if you would please mute it, because it's very difficult for me to concentrate with the noise. Thank you so much. Yes, so I'm an independent consultant working and training people who are dealing with cultural diversity at work, either as managers or as colleagues. And I've always had the interest of doing more research about that, because I often get questions such as, so what is the best way to lead an intercultural group? And there's been a lot of research on cultures separately, so in silos, where people look at, okay, how can you lead in country X? How can you lead in country Y, etc. But business reality is not so separate, of course. Most business reality is a group of people from many different backgrounds, not just with different national backgrounds, but many cultural differences in all kinds of social economic ways. How do you actually lead a team like that? And if you really dig deeper into that topic, what you find is that you have to really get to something that everyone can connect to, such as human dignity, for example, because that's one of those terms that we can probably agree that's quite universal. And actually, my hypothesis is that we need to understand more and better how people actually experience that concept before we can lead them in such a way that we actually help them flourish in a flourishing world, which is the basic goal of humanistic management. So let me share with you where this idea came from, where I am at now, and I'm very, very interested to hear your ideas after my presentation and hear your feedback, of course. So when I started studying organizational psychology, there were a few things I found to be interesting and a little bit bothering as well. And the first thing was that a lot of research on all kinds of dynamics, people-related dynamics in organizations, so communication, leadership, teamwork, they were all based on US-based research. Really 90% or more is based on research that's coming from a few universities actually in the United States. And many of that research wasn't even done in actual organizations. It was done with students of those universities working for their professors. And this is all fine. I think these are just limitations to research. It happens. But what bothered me was the conclusion that this would be generalizable knowledge that we could copy paste onto everyone in the world. And I've always felt that that was not really, how to say, not really the best way to look at leadership, for example, and also communication, cooperation. And Joseph Henrich wrote this wonderful book called The Weirdest People in the World, and actually looked at cultural differences from that view. And this is why we have this little weird guy here on this slide. And he said, we have to really acknowledge that people who are from what he called weird countries, which is an anagram for Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic countries, that they cannot be just the representatives of the whole global way of doing things. So there's nothing wrong with doing research in weird countries, but there is something wrong with concluding that this is the truth for everyone, everywhere, all the time. So I think this first thing is very important. So there's quite a lack of understanding of how do people who are not from weird countries, how do they actually like to be treated? How do they like to treat each other? What works? How do they experience the world? How do they how are they motivated, etc. So all these kind of questions, there's a huge lack of knowledge simply because there have not been a lot of attention for that. And the second thing that really bothered me a bit was the view of human nature that was very predominant in my studies, which was basically a very rational person, right? So this Homo economicus in that sense, who said, well, basically everything I do at work, everything I do in an organization is for two main goals. One is a little bit of safety, but my main driver is really to win, to get things done, to get to wealth, to get to power, to get to status. So in this sense, this person, who actually, of course, does not exist, was really viewed as, if we look at how people behave in organizations, and if we want to understand them better, we have to assume that all people are driven by selfish motives. They're very rational, and they all strive to get basically richer every day. And I felt that this was really a weird way of looking at people, and that it was very incomplete. And I think most people will agree. Even the economists who came up with this idea clearly said, we're just assuming this is not reality. We are just starting off with a reduction of the human person so we can actually start calling economy more of a scientific science. But what happened, like with many of those concepts, is that this actually became the business norm. And people started to treat each other this way. And people started to lead others as if they were only motivated by selfish motives, as if they were not also looking for more in life than money. And I think it caused a lot of negative things. And there have been many, many reasons, of course, that there have been negative consequences, but the modern capitalist business world is really causing all kinds of psychological problems, where people feel very disconnected from their work, where people don't feel that they're doing something useful and meaningful sometimes. And for some people, it can actually lead to really psychological problems or burnout even. Also, it led to huge inequalities, main lack of trust in institutions, lack of trust in each other, and a very negative view on humanity in general. And finally, of course, we're not really taking care of the world as much as we might think would be a better idea if we want to survive. So you probably all know the quote, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. So let's look at how we could do things differently, because there are different ways of dealing with the world, with how we look at people, and with how we look at doing business. So we start really in humanistic management with a new way of looking at human nature. So this is really Homo economicus, this kind of picture you see here. We are a brain, we are rational, we have a drive to basically enrich ourselves. We're pretty selfish, we're quite mechanical. And humanistic management says, no, we're not like that. We are not supposed to be like robots. We are supposed to be like plants or flowers. And if you really want to motivate people, giving them money is not enough. People are more holistic beings, and they need also to find a sense of meaning. They need to find a sense of connection, and they need to find more than just money when they're working. If you really want to connect with people, and if you want them to be happy, loyal, and actually flourishing. So just a different word for blooming, to really feel that they can be their whole selves also in their work environment. So that means you also have to decide to take a different look on why we actually do business. Because of course, businesses need to make a profit, and also in humanistic view on management, we still agree there. There's nothing wrong with making a profit, but it cannot be your only goal, and it cannot be a maximization of profit. And two researchers, Mr. Donaldson and Walsh, they actually looked at that and said, no, if you really want to have a good way of doing business, we need to redefine the purpose of business. We do not accept this homo economicus that is just selfish and rational. We want to look at this from a more holistic perspective. And for this, we need healthy people who are happy with their teams, who know what they're doing in their organization, who contribute something to society, and who are not in the meantime killing or harming the earth in any way. And they defined it by saying this quote, so the purpose of business is the optimization, and I think it's very important to say it's optimization, not maximization, of collective value without violating human dignity in either the past, the present, or the future. So this is a very different way of looking at why our business is actually here, where our business is actually for. They're not there just to make a profit. They're there to make a profit in order to contribute to human dignity for everyone. So that way, money becomes a means to get to a certain goal instead of the goal itself. So humanistic management takes those basic, fundamental ideas and says, okay, there are 4 pillars if you want to be a humanistic manager, if you want to manage people in a humanistic fashion. Human dignity is at its core. So we have to not only protect, but really promote human dignity. So it's more than just not doing harm. It's actually helping people and facilitating people to flourish. And for that, we have to have also an environment that's flourishing. So you cannot flourish in a world that's dying, basically. For that, we need to strive for a common good. We need to have a society that's fair and just and meaningful. We have to look at sustainability. Operating within the limits of the planet is important as well. So humanistic management is in that sense more than anthropocentric, which can be also, I think, a good way of looking at humans as interconnected with their environment. It's not just about the human species surviving, it's about all of us within the rest of the world. We should be caring for each other, for ourselves and each other. And of course, we have to take a stakeholder perspective instead of a shareholder perspective. And the stakeholder perspective in this sense is very, very broad. So even the past and even the future stakeholders count. So even the future generations, for example, have a say in this. So this is the model I work with in my PhD. It's actually not a new model in the sense that it was developed by Michael Pearson, but he took parts and pieces from other scientists, and he actually put them together in such a way that it became an understandable model. So I think it's a nice way of summarizing what humanistic management is or should be. He starts with the premise by saying, okay, we're all free. It starts with freedom. As a human person, we are all free to make certain choices in our lives. And we are not just homo economicus. And if you want to really help people flourish, you need to look at least these 4 universal drivers. And he found 4 drives that he actually borrowed from Paul Lawrence, who came up with them. And he said, well, you need to address at least these 4 drives into a minimum level to achieve what he called the dignity threshold. This dignity threshold concept actually comes from Donaldson and Walsh again. And he basically said, people don't just need money and safety. People also need to have, let's say, a cognitive understanding of what they're doing, but also an emotional understanding of what they're doing. So we need to feel that there's really a purpose we're working towards, that we know why we're doing something, that we're interconnected with the goal and the actions that we're doing at work. And of course, we also need to have a connection to the people around us. And of course, that's not just at work. This is true for people everywhere, but we're focusing here on the business environment. So even at the work environment, we are not motivated just by money and a safe contract, for example. We also need to have good relations with our clients, the people around us, our colleagues. And of course, we need to know why we're doing what we're doing. If we're not just shuffling Excel sheets around and we never know what's happening with them, people get really demotivated quickly. So if you want to meet this dignity threshold, he basically said you have to address all these 4 drives. But the dignity threshold is not well-being or flourishing yet. To get really to this next level of dignity, is that what he calls promoting dignity. He comes up with the idea and says, well, we need something more here. And he says we need something that we can call practical wisdom, moral and practical wisdom. And that's a really old concept, and it's a little bit too complex maybe to go into really big depth here. But basically, this is about using your intuition to make decisions in new situations. And this sounds very vague, but I think what makes it a little bit clearer is it's a combination of experience and knowledge, but knowledge in the sense as more than just cognitive knowledge. So you can maybe imagine things like it's comparable maybe to life knowledge, right? When you get older and you've been in certain situations several times, of course, each time that you go into a new situation, it's new, but you've been in similar situations before. You've seen what happens, how people react, for example, and you know better what you can expect and how you can use this wisdom. It's an accumulation of IQ, so cognitive intelligence, EQ, so emotional intelligence, and metacognition. So it's really, let's say, an aggregate of intelligence, which you actually develop over your life. So it's not like you're born with it or you're not. No, we all develop it, and we develop it in different ways, in different contexts, etc. So he basically said, this Michael Pearson who developed this method, okay, if you want to move from the dignity threshold to really a flourishing environment, you need leaders with practical wisdom. Well, now my question is that I'm pondering for the last 2 and for the next 3 or 4 years is, so how do you do that? How can leaders promote human dignity in these culturally diverse teams using this moral and practical wisdom if people have very different ideas about what human dignity actually looks like, feels like, and experience it? So my research area is here. So this is where I will focus in the model. I'm going to do 3 different cycles of research, and of course they're intertwined and they will all inform the others. First cycle will be pondering the question, how do team members in these diverse teams actually experience human dignity in a work environment? This will hopefully bring some themes and some topics to the surface, which I can use for phase 2, which will be, and what is the role then of this wisdom and leadership in promoting human dignity in culturally diverse teams? So if people, for example, disagree on how respect looks like, for example, if we can assume respect is an aspect of human dignity, but people in different cultural backgrounds have different ideas of what that means in terms of behavior, how, as a practically and morally wise leader, can you actually facilitate that all these differences are respected in the team, for example? So this is the second question. And then the final question will be, how can we actually enact a better practice with regard to this promotion of human dignity? So how can we teach these kind of teams, including their leaders, but also all team members, to actually deal with practical and moral wisdom more if we want to actually get to a world that's flourishing, with flourishing people in flourishing organizations with a flourishing surrounding. So these are my 3 main phases, if you like. And the background here is it's really going to be super qualitative. So I'm doing interviews, I'm doing case studies, I'm doing focus groups, I'm doing observations and shadowing. And finally, I will actually implement some action research. And I'm doing this in 4 different teams in 2 different organizations who are all, of course, multicultural. So far, I've had 30 interviews and 12 nationalities. So that's pretty interesting. So I'm very happy with this sample so far. So the first question I've been wondering is, okay, so we know promoting dignity is needed, human dignity above this threshold, but how do you do that? What do these people actually need in order to thrive? So that's basically the first question I ask. And the second will be, okay, we know that we need to reflect on that because people will be different. We have different moral ideas even. But how does this moral and practical wisdom can help us deal with that in an environment of cultural diversity? And finally, if we want to have actually responsible action, and we define responsible action as really contributing to all the levels of human dignity, so also the individual, team, etc., how can we do that in a way that is truly humanistic and really transformative as well? So these are actually the phases we're going through. So it's very, very exciting and very Yeah, I'm very, very happy to be working on this. And at the moment, I'm really still on the first study. So this is the phase I'm currently in. The question, how do team members from different cultural backgrounds experience human dignity and work? So it's very much focused on their own experience. What do they believe is right? So there's no right or wrong answer. So it's a completely phenomenological study. Yeah, just the definition of cultural diversity to be complete. Yeah, for me, it's much more than just their nationality. So any social identity, basically, that people can differ on. So the main challenges that we found so far, this is really based on literature, but also partly reflected already in the interviews, which is really nice, is actually, well, why aren't people flourishing now, right? What's missing? What's going on that there's no flourishing at the moment, or maybe not enough flourishing at the moment? And there are two very, let's say, large themes that are emerging from literature, which is first the dehumanizing work context. So a lot of us are working in a context where this homo economicus is still the main view of looking at people. And lots of managers, but also specifically people very high in the top management, they really still believe that you should basically reward and punish people, and that money is the main driver for most people, and that in the end people will be selfish. And if you're treated this way, yeah, it doesn't always feel very nice. It has very high consequences for people if they feel that they are used as instruments, if they're not used as people towards a certain goal together. So actually, it's about not feeling like a goal in yourself, but being used as a means towards a certain end. And of course, power differences can also be tricky in how people feel either oppressed or suppressed or supported. So of course, the humanistic view is that, yes, hierarchy is there, it exists, and it's allowed to be there. But you have to be very conscious as a leader that you're not just instrumentalizing your employees in order to get to the next level of performance or whatever it is that you're trying to reach. So the first big challenge is, how do you deal with human dignity in a context that's not very friendly to humans, first of all? So that's the first problem. And second problem we feel that's specific to cross-cultural teams especially is really, how do we deal with this plurality of moral ideas? And what we mean here is not that moral pluralism. It's not the fact that we think that morality can be anything. Plurality really means, yeah, we do agree that there are certain things that are moral and certain things that are not. But within the area of things that are, people can still differ in how you form certain moral aspects. For example, the aspect of human dignity, which is a moral concept in itself. So people might have very different ideas of how they feel dignified. What is dignifying leadership for them, for example? What is dignifying work for them? How do you deal with people who have different ideas about that? And what, as a leader, can you do to support them? So these are the main challenges. Yeah, just very short. People are not robots. We already told you this. So what we focus on is really the internal experience people have. We really combine business with ethics. And this is one of the things that has been separated for a long time, where actually business studies said, yeah, well, ethics, we leave those things to the psychologists and philosophers, and we don't really want to be bothered too much by that. They had this idea that real science had to be a bit more positivistic, that it has to be about numbers, that it had to be measurable. And we even came up with this fake human being of Homo economicus to be able to deal with that. And actually, I think we're now moving more towards a time where we see, well, this is not really working anymore. And let's look at the whole person again. And let's ask this whole person, what do you think? How do you feel? And what do you experience? So that's the phenomenological approach, basically means the subject becomes the object. So what have we seen so far? Well, if you look at human dignity, there are different ways of dealing with that in organizations. The end goal basically is this green triangle where we say people need to be able to flourish, at least in a flourishing environment. How do you get to that? Well, it depends on what level you focus on. And we've seen that a lot of research focuses on one of these levels, which starts with, we should at least protect human dignity, which is, of course, very, very important and a starting point, I would say, for talking about human dignity, also in an organizational environment where at least you need to protect people's rights, where equality is really the main important thing. So people are equal, no matter your background, your color, your age, etc., etc., etc. And we need to have at least a minimum amount of human dignity. And in the humanistic view, that means that at least the threshold should be met. But what happens next? So as we said, if you want to really promote human dignity, you have to make a next step. You have to take a next step. So respecting human dignity in all its forms. So it means that you have to allow people to be free in choosing what feels good for them when it comes to balancing these 4 drives, for example. What values do they prioritize? What strengths do they give to that? How do they order it? And how do they translate it into actual behavior? And finally, we also need to promote human dignity on a personal level. So not just as human beings, not just as human beings who are part of a group, but also as individuals who are all potentially able to flourish. And we actually put here the word love, but it could also be like care if you prefer. So this is really about not just loving the other for his or her humanity, but really looking at the other as a person with potential who makes the world a better place. So it's about really a hopeful way of looking at human beings as a species, but also as human beings on a personal, singular level. And we feel and we found that if you can, as a company, as an organization or a team, protect, respect, and promote human dignity, then that could be a very good recipe to get to Homo florens. So that's not so easy. Just to share a few examples from the interviews we've done so far, just to give you a taste of where we're going to, and I'm very happy to come back another time in the future when I have more results to show. If you look at protecting a shared human dignity, what people find very, very annoying actually is the DEI practices. And I thought it was a really nice thing to show, especially in this group, because I think many of you probably can feel why this is a topic. I had an example of a woman who said, well, I'm from a certain country, let's say country X, and I'm always in the team, the person from country X, right? I'm not just your colleague. I'm not just the formal role that I have. I'm always identified with this nationality. Or same happened with people who said, yeah, but I'm a member of the LGBTQ, etc. Community. He was a gay man, and he said, I'm always the gay colleague, right? I'm never just whatever my name is. And it was really annoying to people. They felt so reduced to their social identity. So I think if you want to protect minorities or underrepresented groups in organizations, that it has to be very based on equality and not on giving people a special place. So they basically told me, well, if you want to help people who are minority in the business environment, you need to treat them equally to everyone else. And everyone else also needs to be treated and protected. So everyone needs their human dignity protected, no matter the group. So please don't treat me differently. Treat me like everyone else. This way I can belong and I can actually feel part of the group. So that was an interesting thing, because with all good intentions, people felt set aside instead of included. Another thing I think really came out was we need to have respect for all these differences. And one of the ways people suggested that could be done better is by really sharing a team culture in terms of really co-creating one. So instead of saying, hey, we have an intercultural team, this is how we do it here, welcome in the team, this is how you should act, to really say, okay, with every new member either going or coming, we have to redefine ourselves. We have to take time to do that. We have to take, it costs money, it costs investments. It's not always efficient, but I think it's very effective to actually really involve everyone in creating a new culture together in which everyone feels that this freedom is actually respected. And finally, we also found there's a lot of need to feel unique in that sense, to feel that I can be my authentic self. So even if I'm from a certain culture, I'm so much more than just that. Even if I'm a minority or underrepresented or a female or gay or whatever it is that sets me apart from whatever you think is the norm, let me be me. Let me be who I am. And for that, we found that management has a huge buffer function as well, to really keep treating people not as instruments and not as means, but really as people, as goals in themselves. And I think this is where care comes in, or love, if you prefer, where people really need to look at you as a whole person, as a real whole person, and never as a number. And management can form a buffer, specifically in moments where there is a top management that is looking at Excel sheets, And there is actually a real person underneath that number on your Excel sheet.
Danaë,
Yeah.
it is now 11:15.
Yeah, I need 30 seconds, then I'm done.
I know you've just got a couple more to do. You've also got some references. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. 30 seconds, I'll finish up. I think it's just the conclusion here. We see the world as we are, not as the world is. I think that's really important to know. You probably know this picture, but for a lot of people, this is still news. And as managers, as humanistic managers, I think it's important that we tune in to all these differences without trying to put our view of the world on top of others. And to do that, we need to be open, loving, and caring for all the differences that we have and see in the world. Thank you all very much. Feel free to send me an email message or look me up online. Thank you so much for your time and for listening. Thank you.